Suzanne, it's so great to connect with you today, and thank you for making yourself available. And yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to you about two very important topics today. So just a little background on sort of, where you are and where you've come from, so that people know, that you come with great credibility.
Okay, I'm the president of a law firm with 18 attorneys known as Griffiths Law PC. I operate out of Denver, Colorado. I am a South African born and bred attorney. I spent the first 18 years of my life in Port Elizabeth, and then I went to the University of Cape Town and practiced in downtown Cape Town for 15 years. I have 3 children, both 2 lawyers, one daughter who's actually at Johns Hopkins Hospital doing pediatric cardiology and about to be co-opted to the front line, which is, of course, challenging for a mom. And I practice family law exclusively, and have some complicated and high-end cases and some very high-conflict cases.
And I'm glad that you've mentioned high conflict cases, because right now we're seeing a lot of that in the personal sector, particularly around parenting, single parents and co-parenting plans, around how do they deal with the COVID-19, particularly with this physical and social distancing and enforcing the co-parenting plans or shared custody and things like that. What would your recommendations be?
Well, our courts have generally been saying that parenting plans continue. You cannot withhold the children just because you say we have COVID-19 and therefore it's dangerous. Unless there are endangerment situations or special situations, you have to transport the children back and forth between homes. There's a special exception in Colorado for transportation pursuant to a court order. So most parents are expected to exchange the children. Exceptions would be a child with a great amount of immune deficiency issues, or a parent with really, really large medical problems, or alternatively a positive COVID diagnosis. That would make things different. Some of my clients have been saying, I'm very afraid because my spouse is a nurse testing COVID patients or an emergency room doctor on the front line. And my inclination, although we haven't tested it, is that the judges will say parenting time continues. You do not lose your children because you happen to be saving lives. It's a sort of public policy issue. You don't take your children away because a person happens to be exposed to danger. But I think that anybody who is on the front line is taking extraordinary precautions to protect their children.
And I think, you mentioned as a mom with your own daughter going into the front line now, that brings, just from a mother's point of view, a sense of concern and anxiety and stress with that. So there are a lot of parents out there that have these same sort of stresses and anxieties, and that are potentially not willing to let another parent co-parent.
We are warning those parents that the judges are going to see them in a very bad light, and there could be a penalty or a consequence. So this is not the opportunity to hide behind the fact that the judges are not generally in operation. Motions to enforce parenting time are not being dealt with at this point. So this is not an opportunity. Eventually there will be consequences, and we're warning clients of that.
How would you go about advising parents where there is a co-parenting plan in place to ease each other's concerns and fears? What are some of the sort of the steps or the precautions that they could take, or the negotiations to find a middle ground?
Well, assure the other parent that you are staying at home, using Purell, doing everything to protect the children, using masks when you go to supermarkets. The issue is people are shopping. They're actually going and buying groceries, and they're actually buying alcohol. And in Colorado, marijuana is legal. So they're buying all those things. Being careful. This is a frightening virus, and we're warning people to just be as careful as possible. If you watch the television daily, it's frightening watching people on ventilators.
And that comes to now, obviously, with the children and, being confined at home and in these spaces where there is a lot of this media and stories around what's going on, and potentially a lot of fear coming from that and being exposed to all of these things. How do you manage the space for children?
Well, some people are reporting that they're having opportunities with their children that they've never had in their lives. They're going for walks together, they're spending time together, and these are rare opportunities where normally life is on the fly. They never sit down and have dinner together. People are actually spending more time with their families. So in some respects, it's actually very helpful. Then I've had clients who've said, well, I'm the CEO of a big company, and currently I am a homeschooler, cleaning a house. It's tough. People are finding it very stressful and very difficult. I can't think of a more stressful time for all my clients than the current. It's extremely stressful.
Yeah, and I think what's slightly different here in South Africa is we have complete lockdown. So we're not allowed out to go for walks outside. We are confined to our homes. They are not selling alcohol for the 21 days of our lockdown period. And then obviously with that is, that sense of, I suppose, being in confinement or being in jail almost.
Well, they did ban alcohol and marijuana, and there was such a protest that they changed the legislation. I think they took the position there would literally be riots if they didn't allow at least people to drink alcohol and marijuana. So that's helping, I believe.
It's interesting you say that because, so we've seen reports coming out of China where after being in lockdown, the divorce rate has spiked. And then now coming out of France where they say that the domestic violence rate has increased by 30%. And the concern, which is why they banned alcohol sales here, was for that very big reason, was obviously to try and curb domestic violence. But here you've got families that are forced or cooped up in that space. They've got nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, particularly if there has been a history of violence or volatility in the home. And that's a big concern here.
Well, one of the problems is I have no doubt that more clients are being beaten up, assaulted, etc. in their homes. A lot of it we don't know because clients have got very limited ability. Most of my female clients are afraid. For example, I'm speaking to a client later today who cancelled her appointment because she said her husband's always at home. Most clients who call wait for the husband to be out at work or out somewhere. So I think a lot of the calls for help are not being made right now because the spouse who they're very afraid of is in the house, in listening distance. So I think you're going to find after this episode ends that a lot of people were subjected to tremendous abuse and violence. There are helplines, etc. But the problem that you've got is there's not much ability to get alternative accommodation, to move. There's not much connection with family. Most of my domestic violence clients will have a mother or a brother or somebody who takes them in. Right now, families are being separated, so people are very, very alone. And there's very limited ability to do anything about it. And we have to wait and see what happens to that. As regards the divorce rate, I'm watching with interest, and I haven't really been able to make a conclusion, but I'll just tell you two things that I always noticed before. Where there were long weekends, happy Christmas weekends in America, they have Thanksgiving, which is a long weekend with festivities and turkey dinners, etc. My experience is after a long weekend, the divorce rate actually goes up. And so, but there's a difference. Normally those weekends are filled with family and in-laws and extended family. Now people are staying completely by themselves with their children. So I don't know how that will impact. We will tell, over time. But there's no doubt, I used to make a joke and say, if you want to reduce the divorce rate, it should be cold. Everybody's got to go to work and ban holidays. So I think the divorce rate probably will go up, but it's going to be interesting to see because nobody's spending weekends with in-laws and family. Those times that you would think are happy are, in fact, when people make decisions to divorce. The other issue, let me just go to the second part. The other issue which drives divorces, and this is another wait-and-see situation, is financial stress. Stress impacts marriages. And I cannot begin to imagine the financial stress people are going to be under in the next 6 to 12 months. So you get divorces in the financial stress times that are based on very different reasons to the divorces you see in the good times. It's usually job loss, somebody who doesn't get employment, their wife gets very tired, husband hanging around and unemployed, or vice versa. So I think you're going to see divorce increases based on financial stress, as well as the fact that they've spent a lot of time together in cramped circumstances and with no other social outlets.
Yeah, and I was going to actually mention the whole financial stress, because that's obviously a big concern for a lot of people now in terms of, the economy and what sort of sense of job security they have if they don't already know the answer to that, because, there's going to be huge impact on the economy going forward. And there's lots of predictions from that point of view. So just sort of some words of wisdom from your side, particularly around the abuse side, if somebody is being abused, because often when we talk domestic violence, we think or associate physical abuse with it. We don't stop to think about the other forms of abuse, the mental, the emotional, the sexual, the financial, and all of those things that go with it. So how can someone kind of really acknowledge that, okay, maybe I am being abused here, and what are the steps that I can take? What would your advice or recommendations be?
There are places that you can reach out, but here's the fear. If you go into a women's shelter, there's the fear that you could find yourself getting COVID in that kind of environment. There's not many good options. We can get protection orders, but where do people go? There's no movers that can move your furniture. So at this point in time, probably the only option is to hunker down, try to minimize conflict and stress and abuse with the other parent. In other words, don't engage. If they start saying you're a fat, ugly cow, instead of saying, something back, just hunker down for the moment and wait your opportunity. I've often said to clients, you have to pick the moment to do something. If you're sitting in a concentration camp, you don't go running for the gate and get shot. You wait and you create a tunnel. You create an exit strategy. You speak to your neighbors. You tell them, look, I'm very afraid. My husband's abusive. If I, say green tree and call you, you need to know, call the cops. And people have got to find solutions at the moment. They've got to be solution orientated, because there's no, in a normal course of domestic violence, I'll file an emergency restraining order. I will move the client to her parents or to people who are earning, can afford a deposit. I will often say, go and get an alternative accommodation, and when you're ready, you pack and you move, you pick up the furniture when your husband's at work, and off you go. There's not those opportunities right now, and people are afraid of COVID-19. So many are simply sitting there, emotional abuse, they're enduring it. And I imagine that at some point in time, people have big memories. I do divorces for clients who, for example, had a heart attack or cancer. They never forget that their spouse was not there for them. And I imagine that people will later look back and say, during COVID-19, my spouse abused me. And they men, but this is not only women, men get abused too.
Yeah, very much so.
This is a question of most people are making the best to keep things stable. And now's not the time to get involved in a huge court battle because the judges, I mean, most of our courts are essentially closed.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier when we were chatting around particularly parents that are not close by where they can manage their co-parenting. So, for example, they would take turns over, for example, the holidays, school holidays and stuff like that from a travel logistics point of view. How would you suggest that they try and manage the situation to the best of their ability right now within their rights?
Our planes are still flying, but I know one judge, for example, said that if a child has to be transferred more than 50 miles, it's not happening. I'm not sure what you're doing with parents who live in Johannesburg and Cape Town. Are they traveling between homes? In Colorado, for the most part, it's a tough one. And some parents are simply saying, I'll make up in the summer, I'll make up at another time. Fortunately, we have FaceTime, we have Skype, we have Zoom. And it's an abnormal situation. You can tell me, what are you doing between Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban? Are you flying children back and forth?
So a lot of our flights have been, well, in fact, majority of our flights have been grounded for all, because of the national lockdown where everyone is required to stay at home. So a lot of our airlines are not operating. I think there are the potential, the emergency services that are taking place, but majority are not. So that is also putting a lot of strain on families, particularly now where, a single parent is responsible 24/7. They don't have that other parent to relieve them like they would potentially every second weekend or, help as they would have under normal circumstances. And that brings another level of stress and strain.
It's a horrible time. I can't think of a time. I went through the recession of 2008 to 2012, where people were unemployed. That's the other thing. Divorces become very, very difficult during recession times. Once this is over, if people file for divorce, the extra challenges are you can't sell a house, you can't sell a business, you can't get cash out. Loans are difficult to get. So whereas 6 months ago, if people decided to get divorced, sell the house was sold in a week. Whereas now, people are going to, as they did in 2008, 2009, find themselves owning a house together for maybe a year or 2 or 3 and unable to sell a business, staying in business together because there's no way that you can sell the business and there's no buyer.
Yeah. I think just last sort of parting comments as a wife and a mother and a business owner yourself, what are some sort of tips on how to not only survive COVID, but being in lockdown and that some sort of strategies that you are potentially implementing or that you can share with others?
Well, as a business owner, the most important thing I've said to all my staff is I am going to do everything I possibly can to keep everybody employed and not have any layoffs. I've suggested to people that if you have downtime, write articles, learn a new skill, keep yourself occupied, don't just sit and watch television and be miserable. So we're always so busy. This is the opportunity to write that article you never wrote, to do the thing that you've never done. So staff are terribly, terribly afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. So I've gone, as I said, out of my way to assure people that we will survive. We've cut overheads, we've cut bonuses, we've cut discretionary spending, we've cut back to bare minimum spending so that we can extend our ability to survive. And I think you asked as a parent, 2 of my sons are in business with me, so we discuss the challenges every day. I can't tell you what it feels like to be a parent of a daughter who's 34 and who's about to go to the front line. She said to me yesterday, I am so anxious. And she also said, my brothers were supposed to go to war, not me. And that is frightening. Fortunately, she's at Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is probably one of the top hospitals in the world. So one would hope that the protective gear would be there for her. She's a pediatric cardiologist, so she deals with children, but Fortunately, children aren't getting very sick at the moment. So their pediatric facilities are half full because they've sent all elective surgeries home, especially heart problems. They don't want them in the hospital. So all the pediatric doctors are going to the adult frontline. So that's very scary. And I think you had a third issue you wanted me to deal with.
As a relationship and being confined in the same space for couples.
Well, I share a house with my husband, and it's been fine. We make sure we take a walk every day. It's very good because you're cooped up in the house. It's very difficult. And we have tea together, and tea and a biscuit. And we do the best to try and make every day normal, but it doesn't feel normal. It's really, really difficult.
Suzanne, thank you for sharing your insights and your story. I've really enjoyed it. And if people wanted to get hold of you, do you have a website or that?
We do. It is www.griffiths, Griffiths, law, LAWPC.com. Or you can look for Suzanne Griffiths. People want to reach out, I'm happy to talk to them. In fact, I'm talking to a South African tomorrow who is planning to emigrate to the States and wants some guidance and assistance.
Fantastic. Thanks, Suzanne. And yeah, I hope to see you on the other side when we come out of all of this and to touch base again.